Welcome to this Windows Server 2012 Top Tips video with Chirag. I'll be sharing with you quite a few tips and tricks with Windows Server 2012 that you can use throughout this video. Now, this is not a detailed how-to video as such, but I will be covering a fair amount of stuff. As you can see, I'll be covering getting started Windows Server 2012 right down from installing, sort of downloading the VHD or downloading the ISO, getting it set up, or if you're setting up your lab, basically using the GUI, getting around, server management, Windows PowerShell, some tips on Hyper-V usage as well, some look at advanced features, and links to loads and loads of resources as well. So I will be sharing all these different tips and tricks that you can use to make sure that you can use the most awesome server product available in the market today. Now you can see that I'm using Microsoft OneNote web app as well. I will be sharing this with you, so you can see this is in my SkyDrive, it's made public. I will give you the URL for this as well, and you can then download it and use it to point to any resources that you need as well. And as I talk through different sections, I'll have different links to different resources, maybe downloads or videos or trainings or anything that, like ebooks, anything that will help you with your learning journey as such. So I'm ready to get started. Let's get started. So just a quick overview on what we'll be looking at. So the main objectives for this are for you to familiarize yourself with the Windows Server 2012, what it has to offer. Set a firm foundation. Again, as I mentioned, it is not a detailed how-to. There's loads and loads of different content available on the web. This just helps you reorganize and point yourself into the right direction, give you the basic tips and tricks that can really help you in your usage of Windows Server 2012. And obviously I want to share my enthusiasm about the product with you. So okay, let's get started then. Welcome back. Now before we get started on talking about how you'd set up your lab, I just want to briefly go over this infographic that I got from TechNet, which talks about why use Windows Server 2012, and you can see it's got some interesting figures that's showing about 73% of the market share is Windows Server in 2012, and it shows a survey that they did with 70 companies across, showing some significant cost savings in the IT labor costs, a reduction of 91% in terms of server admin labor and so on and so forth. Interesting figure here where a company is estimated that they're going to save a 6-figure operational cost saving by moving from VMware to Hyper-V as such. So there's some interesting information that you can look at a little bit of a later stage. There's also an Australian infographic as well, very similar, but they've also got some specific information, maybe specific to Australia. For example, there's a particular company which said that they've had an immediate cost saving of $50,000 by implementing Hyper-V replica. So there's loads of many different reasons why you'd want to use Windows Server 2012. As more and more people start using it, we'll start to see more of these infographics with different demographics, information from different areas as well. So there are many reasons to get started with an evaluation of Windows Server 2012. So let's talk about downloading Windows Server 2012. Now you can just go to this URL and get a download of Windows Server 2012, and when you're doing the evaluation, you have two options really. You have the options of going for an ISO image, or you're doing an evaluation VHD as well. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a brief demo for you on how you would use a VHD if you wanted to do, for example, a boot to VHD setup, which is quite useful. So I'll just go ahead and do that. Okay, so I have a VHD download at the moment in my C drive. So I've got Server 2012 VHD. You notice that I also have Server 2012 diff VHD. That's a differencing disk. It's a great idea. So one of the tips that I'd use is to use a lot of differencing disks. It'll save you a lot in storage. Obviously later on, if you're using a lot of virtual hard disks as well, it's great to use the Windows Server 2012 dedupe feature, and we'll talk about that as well. Let's say I've downloaded the Windows Server 2012 VHD that I've got. What I can do first of all is I can create a differencing disk on that. So what I'll do is I'll go into disk part. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to then create a virtual disk file which is called win2k12 diff.vhd, obviously the parent being this Windows Server 2012 VHD file that I have in there. So we've got that in there, and I'll just let that complete. And as you can see in there, it's now created a Win2K 12 diff.vhd file as well for me, which is just about 187K as well. So it's not big at all. Obviously it will grow bigger, but it's not as big because it's just using the parent as the base disk as such. So once I've done with that, what I can do is I can then just load that up on disk management. So I go into disk management. I will attach this new VHD that I've created there, the Win2K12 diff VHD. I'll attach that, and I just need to take a note of what is the drive letter, so that's drive letter E in there. And what I'll do is I'll go back onto my command prompt, and I will then put the boot files in there. So I will then create a BCD boot, and E drive, Windows, and they've created the boot files, and all I need to do now is a BCD edit entry that I would do. I would then set I'll just set it as a default, and then in this I will just set the description in there to Win2K12 DC1. Oops, missed a D there. Okay, and that's done there. Now if I was to go into system properties, I'd be able to see that it's now created that under startup and recovery. I can then see that I've got an entry in there. My mouse is going all over the place now, and you can see that I've got different options in there. Okay, so now obviously if I reboot my machine, it will be able to actually go into and boot into that particular VHD, and it's a great, fantastic way to just creating different VHDs which you can actually then boot into. Okay, so and that's a great way of just setting up boot to VHD. I'll just close up all these windows that I've got, and now I'll talk you through the remaining bits. So now obviously one of the things you can do is you can set up boot to VHD using differencing. This is great as well. You can obviously use Hyper-V as well, so you can use Hyper-V to then set up your different VHDs, set up networks and do different things, especially Hyper-V Server 2012. In Server 2012 has a lot more enhancements, which we'll look at a little bit later on. But you can also just download Hyper-V Server 2012, which is a standalone product, and it's absolutely free to use as well, and you can get that in there as well. So that's a great way to look at. And the last bit I want to talk about is Windows Azure. Now Windows Azure is fantastic as well. You can get a 90-day trial, which is absolutely free to use as well. And what I'll do is I will quickly just show you a demo of how you would then set up a virtual machine in Windows Azure. Okay, so I've now logged on to Windows Azure. In fact, I just set this up today morning. It just took just less than 2 minutes actually to set up the whole account. Now in here, if I go on to new, you can see now in there I have the options to set up a virtual machine. And when I click on virtual machine, I can either have one from a gallery, or I can do a quick create. And you can, as you can see, there's a variety of different options that I have in here. So obviously in this case, if you wanted a Windows Server 2012, you can then, obviously this is based on your subscriptions and what you want to use. But if you're using the 90-day trial, at least you can try out these different options and features that you have. It's great just for some lab work, some development, some hands-on work that you want to do as well. So here in this case I could opt to choose a small core one as well. I can create a DNS name for it. I'm just going to create one for test lab. I'm going to set a password for it, and it'll ask me for my location in here. I'll leave that to West Europe, and I'll start creating the virtual machine. And it's going to take a little bit of a while for that. Obviously it doesn't like that because the DNS name's already been taken, so I'll just put in my name and there just put it to 2K12 and then create a virtual machine in there, and it's going to start creating that in there. It's not instant, it obviously needs to spin up a virtual machine, but it'll do that in a while. And I've got a virtual machine and I can keep adding more, and obviously I can even remote desktop into this as well. It's great, it's fantastic for your lab work. I highly recommend. You've got 90 days to try it out, and there's no catch in it. You know, there's a $0 spending limit as well in it, so there's a cap on it, so just use it. It is a great little tool to use. Okay, now that we've seen how to set up Windows Azure, just a quick few tips once again. Obviously for Windows Azure, for the 90-day free trial, you will get, there are certain limitations in terms of what you get, but you have a spending cap of $0, which is great. The only thing that I will mention though is, even if your machines are off, you will still accumulate your compute hours. So if you're not using it, you'd better just delete the VM in there. So just a quick tip for you in there. Obviously, just a quick repetition of the tips. Make sure, just use Hyper-V, use several boxes. Make sure you make a good use of the evaluation of Windows Server 2012. Use boot to VHD and use differencing disks. Okay then, so one last bit before we move on to the next bit as well is, if you wanted to set up detailed lab with your Windows Server 2012 and try out different scenarios, maybe for example you want to set up direct access in your environment and you want to actually test what it might be like if you had to set up, what would be the setup scenarios and so on and so forth, then you can actually look at Microsoft's test lab guides as well. So you can go onto their website. There again, you have the link access in this notebook as well. You can go in there and set up a setup for different scenarios for different technologies within Windows Server 2012, which you can then use to then leverage onto your business as well. So I would highly recommend that you use that as well. Okay, now we are ready to then move on to the next section, which is using the GUI. Okay, welcome to this section on using the GUI. Now, the Windows Server 2012 GUI is different from Windows Server 2008. Obviously, noticeably, it looks quite a bit like Windows 8, especially if I hit the Start button. You've got this. We get many people who ask, why do this? Why have the same interface for the server? And well, there's two main reasons really. If you're administering Windows Server 2012 and Windows 8 as well, you have the same experience. And also the other fact is, if you have any Windows 8 clients who are remote desktoping into the Windows Server, well then they have the same experience because they're looking at the similar interface as such. Now very quickly I'll show you. I've got the OneNote app as well in there. The OneNote app, by the way, is fantastic. So one of the tips that I'll give you is use Windows 8, use the OneNote app. It's really brilliant. So you can see in here I'll be able to then access. You can see I'm actually able to access the OneNote package that I've been working on in there. So if I can then see using the GUI, now in this using the GUI section, I can then see these are my notes for using the GUI. It's a brilliant little tool that you can use as well. So I'll just move back into the desktop for the moment. So this is sort of the traditional desktop that you have in there. Now some quick shortcut tips that you can use as well. If I press Control I, the Windows key and I, in there I can then access things like my settings, and this is where I can do things like my power shutdown and so on and so forth as well. I can then do Windows Q, the Windows key plus Q, which will give me the search bar as well as you can search. Now I don't have to do that. If I just hit the window key and I can then type in search, so if I then wanted, for example, control panel, I can then just search for it. So I don't really need the start menu. Everything is just quickly there for me as well. If I then did the Windows key plus X, I can then get different options in here. So if I wanted to quickly go into maybe device manager, disk management, computer management, I can actually do that as well. Things like run, search and all that. So sort of the power users menu, I can do that in there. And lastly, I've got the charms menu, so Windows key plus C as well, which allows me to do things like share, search and so on and so forth as well in there. So those are some of the shortcut keys. Someone once asked me, like, what's the quickest way to just shut down or log off? Alt plus F4 still works, it's still great. So I can then do things like sign out, and I can sleep, switch user, shut down, restart, and so on. So those are some of the tools, the tips that you can still use as well. It's, you know, once you get used to the GUI, you can see that thing. You can get to things very quickly. But the biggest tip that I have really is just use Server Manager. Server Manager has everything in there. When you look at tools, you will be able to get everything that you need in there. You've got all the bits and pieces in Manage as well. You've got a fair amount of things in there. And those are the tips and tricks that I have in using the GUI. Okay, welcome to the section on server management. Just before we get started, just wanted to quickly do a recap on the GUI bits that we looked at. So obviously these are the shortcut keys that you have. You have a different combinations of the Windows key I, C, Q and X for different options that you have. Alt plus F4 still works. But as I mentioned, use Server Manager. It has everything that you need. And obviously use Windows 8 and Windows 8 apps like OneNote. There's also other great apps that you can use as well. Now in terms of server management, obviously the top tip that I have first of all is use it. It's brilliant. There's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of enhancements that you can use as well, and they'll do a brief demo for you as well. So there are certain things that you can do in terms of changing, for example, the refresh rate, creating server groups, and so on and so forth. So I'll quickly just give you a demo on that. So what I have in here is I've got Hyper-V, and I've got different machines running. I'd like to run more, but unfortunately I can't. This machine's only got 4 gig of memory. But if I did have a lot of hardware resources available to me with Windows Server 2012, really I can have hundreds of machines, virtual machines that I can use as well. It is, you know, limitless virtualization in essence. So I'm just gonna quickly just go on to DC1, which I've got. So I've got a domain controller in here, and I'm just gonna fire up server management and just show you a few top tips as well in there. Obviously one of the tips is you can add more servers in there and you can manage them. Obviously the other thing that you can do as well is you can create server groups. So by default you already have server groups based on different roles that you have, but you can actually then create different, you can actually create a group name and then add the servers in there if you want to. One of the other tips that you can do is you can actually change the refresh rate. Now the lowest you can go is 1 minute. You can't go lower than that. So if you wanted more up-to-date data, you can go up to 1 minute. So the other option really is, if you wanted to get real-time information, then you might want to integrate System Center components that you can then use for real-time monitoring of what's going on in your environment as well. And as I mentioned, you've got the tools menu, you've got everything in there that you can use. So those are some of the tips that you do have in terms of Windows Server. Now a couple of other things that you can do as well. Now for example, here I can right click and I can just add roles and features in there, and I can do that remotely for another machine, so that's handy as well. Notice that I can't do that if I had more than one selected. So if you wanted to do something like this, then in that case use Windows PowerShell, and you can do that simultaneously on different other components as well. Now what I want to show you is I've got London SVR1. One of the other things that I want to actually show you is another tip and trick. You notice that when I right click I have add roles and features, but I don't have the bit to actually remove. So the bit to remove actually is from this menu itself as well. You can't do it from the right click as well. So that's another tip that you have in there. So if I clicked on remove as well, one of the things that I can do is remotely on the other server I can strip away the GUI. Now by default Microsoft have the install set at core, so you can choose otherwise, but core is a fantastic using the core version is a lot better than using the full GUI in terms of the footprint that you have, and in terms of just the amount of hardware resources you use and so on and so forth. So what I would recommend though is you can set up a full GUI and then you can just strip away the GUI and then just have a core system, and it can be managed remotely if you want to. Now if you wanted to get rid of it, you can then just go down to features, and in features and user interfaces you can then get rid of the server graphical shell. You can leave the graphical management tools if you just wanted things like the server manager basically server management MMC, so you can keep that if you wanted to as well, or you can remove both of them away if you wanted to just have a full core machine as well, and you can get rid of all of that and just remove that completely from a machine. Obviously later on you can add that on if you want to as well. So one of the a tip that I would say is, just strip away the GUI so you can have a core machine. It'll function a lot better, it'll be a lot more secure as well in there. Okay, so I have a Windows 8 virtual machine already set up with RSAT on it. So you can obviously just, once you've installed it, you can just go to administrative tools, and in there you can then have the different options that you've selected, and you can select server manager in there. What I did do is this particular computer did not have internet access, so another tip that you can use is I used Folder to ISO, which is it's a program which is a freeware program. It is not supported, it doesn't come with any guarantees, but you can obviously use it if you wanted to just quickly install something on a machine. It'll convert any folder to an ISO, and that's what I've done in this case. So I'll quickly just show you. I've got server manager in this, and what I did with that was I added the domain controller in there, and now I can manage it remotely, so I can do everything I need to right from my client, so I don't have to go to a server. So this really makes a huge difference in terms of administration. So here's another tip: use RSAT with Windows 8. Also, one additional bit is, by default you normally get an error in server manager saying performance counters not started. Normally when you right click right at the bottom, you would get an option which says start performance counters. That's another option that you can select as well. And yes, these are the tips that I have in terms of server management. One last bit that I want to mention is, especially if you're managing Server 2008 R2 or Server 2008 RTM versions, you may then want to install the Windows apart from RTM, you want to install Windows Management Framework 3.0 in there. So Windows Management Framework 3.0 along comes with PowerShell as well, which means from your server manager you'll be able to manage some of your Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 servers as well. You won't be able to do everything, but at least it'll allow you to use those on server manager as well. You can also install that on Windows 7, so you can get Windows PowerShell 3.0, which is really brilliant. So those are okay, welcome back to the next section on Windows PowerShell. Windows PowerShell is fantastic. It's so powerful. There's so many things you can do with Windows PowerShell, and I'd like to share a few things with that. Just before I do that, just a quick recap on what we did previously in the earlier module as well. So as I mentioned, use Server Manager. It's brilliant. You can change things like your refresh rate as well, your performance based counters as well. You can see so many things. You can have server groups set up as well. I didn't show you NIC teaming, but NIC teaming is a fantastic feature that you can set up as well. So if you wanted high availability, you can set that up. RSAT in Windows 8, brilliant, use that. And server core to remove the graphical shell as well. So those are some of the things you can do in terms of your server management. We also looked at links on how you can install WMF, which will give you Windows PowerShell 3 and the WMI environment, which can allow you to manage through your server manager in Server 2012. You can manage your Server 2008 R2 and Server 2008 RTM machines as well. So let's have a quick look at Windows PowerShell as well now. So I'll just do a few just a few quick demos as well in terms of how you would use it. So let's just have a quick look at Windows PowerShell. So if I started up a Windows PowerShell session, now the thing with Windows PowerShell is, now with Windows Server 2012 there are well over 2,400 commandlets that you would use. So and the way you would sometimes use that, so let's say for example if I wanted to use Hyper-V for example, so I would import the Hyper-V module as well, and if I wanted to, for example, just see what command options I have in there, so I would say, look, I want to know what command options I have in the Hyper-V module, and it's crazy. It's a crazy amount of modules that I have. It's just a crazy amount of commandlets just for Hyper-V. So many of them, so many of them as well. So there's quite a few things that I have now. it's very difficult to actually remember all of them and what they do, and especially since all of them will have different sets of parameters as well. Things are different. For example, you would just simply things like your basic dir, for example, command would be get child item, for example, and so on and so forth. So there's different options, but it is there just to make things a little bit more powerful, so you can have a lot of different functionality, a lot of different options. So what the strategy that you have in terms of being able to use all of this is to use Windows PowerShell ISC then. And ISC basically will allow you to leverage the power of PowerShell without being inundated with so many commands and trying to remember them and how to use them as well. So I'll just do a quick sort of demo on that in terms of how you can use PowerShell in terms of with Windows PowerShell ISC. So here on the right hand side I can pick what modules I want. Let's say, for example, if I just I wanted to know, for example, how the get VM command works. Now I don't even have to remember the exact command. If I just remember part of it, I can just type that out and it'll give me the different options. And obviously if I had to pick one particular one, so let's say, for example, I was working on a VM switch, and I can then click on show details. It'll then give me the parameters that I would need in there. So I can use all the different parameters, including common parameters as well, and I can then put them in, and I can either insert them or I can run them directly. So it just makes my life a lot more easier because I don't have to then remember specific commands. This means that I'll have less typos, less errors and stuff like that I'll have as well in there. So it just makes a huge difference. And as I mentioned in here, you've got the IntelliSense option, where if you then type in something, it'll normally start giving you, if it doesn't, I can just start IntelliSense. It will then give you options in terms of what you can do, or what options you have, what sort of things you can do as well. So one of the top tips that I'd give you is use Windows PowerShell ISC. It's brilliant. You will be able to leverage a lot of things with Windows PowerShell. You can do a lot of things in Windows PowerShell that will take you hundreds or thousands of clicks on the GUI, and you can just do that with a single command in Windows PowerShell. So use that. The other things that you can do is if you'd run certain commands as well. So let's say, for example, if I had run get help as well, and if I'd run different commands, if I then pressed F7, can you see at the moment it's giving me a list of all the commands that I have? So I can I can sift through all the different commands, and I can then choose a particular command that I want to run. So for example, if I then so another tip that I'd like to share with you at the moment is the update help command. Now when you're using Windows PowerShell, you can get detailed help. So when you use the help switch, you can actually get things like examples. You can get detailed examples. You can get a full help option as well. Now you can get that from TechNet, but if you wanted to actually make sure that when you run a command you want to see how you can run it, how you can use it, you can just do the update help. As you can see right now, I'm running the update help, and it's then updating from the Microsoft content side. It's updating all the content for help as well, and that's another great thing to do as well in terms of Windows PowerShell. And those are the tips that I have for you in Windows PowerShell. I'll just quickly fire up my OneNote again just to recap as well. So as I mentioned, use Windows PowerShell, use the update help, use shortcut keys like the F7. You can see a list of all the commands that you have. You can use F9 to run any of the commands that you've got. You can use Windows PowerShell ISC. It's really great. And additionally, which I didn't show to you, but you can use the what if parameter. If you're using the what if parameter, you can actually, before running a command, you can actually see what will be the result of that particular command, and that's a nice way to actually look at what's going on before trying to just run the command and causing chaos. So those are some of the tips that you have in terms of Windows PowerShell. You've also got the TechNet Microsoft Script Center as well. That actually then takes you to basically a resource center where you can get anything and everything that you would need for Windows PowerShell as well. So there's loads and loads of information that you can use in there. including videos, including sample scripts, so many different things that you can use, and I'd highly recommend that you can use this as a resource, because there's very many scripts already created by people. You can just go and reuse them as well, tweak them, and to fit your purpose, basically, in essence. Then, and that's it for this section. We will now move on to our next section then. Okay, welcome back to the storage solutions section. This is going to be a very short section where I'm just going to primarily talk to you about data deduplication. I'm going to show you the DP eval tool that you can use to actually evaluate how much you could save with data deduplication. Data deduplication is a fantastic tool to help you save loads of space and money. I will leave a link on how data deduplication works, and you know how it's benefited a lot of other people as well. But what I'll do is I'll do a brief demo on the DDP eval tool. I'll run it on an external hard disk so you can see how much I can save as well, and then we'll sort of finish off with talking about storage pools. So I'm gonna just I'll just show you. And in fact, before I do that, I just wanted to briefly mention that, as you can see here, this again is an evaluation version of Windows Server 2012. This is a boot to VHD that I have, and what I've got with that is I've obviously got my C drive. That's the VHD image itself. My D drive is actually the other operating Windows Server 2008 image that I have. You can see those other hard disks that I was working on previously as well, and I've got an external hard disk as well. So I've got it's got 3 terabytes, but it's only got about 400 gigs of space in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the DDP eval. Now the DDP eval tool is available from your System 32, Windows System 32, if you install the feature, and you can then copy across the tool anywhere. So you can just copy across the exe file. At the moment I've just copied it across to D drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a command prompt for that. Oops. Now, one of the things that you need to make sure is you need to run as administrator, otherwise it will not work. So that's another tip for you: run as administrator. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly run that, and I'm going to run it on my F drive, and I'll say did verbose. Now it's going to run. Obviously it's not something that will happen straight away. It's going to take a short while to get that sorted. So what I'll do is I'm going to pause the video at this point, and once it's done I'll come back so I can just quickly show you the results for this. Okay, we're back, and as you can see, my DDP eval is still not finished. It's still at 7%. What I will do is I'm not going to let it finish, mainly because of the time factor, because I don't have enough time to just wait for this to finish to be able to show the output to you. So what I'm looking to do is show you a TechNet article where somebody's actually run a DDP eval, and you can see it was on 100 gigs, and the optimized files after being optimized would come down to less than 17 gigs, which give space savings of about 82%. Obviously this will vary based on the type of data that you have, and it can vary, but it can go up to 95% with VHDs. So it's a great amount of savings that you can have. So I'll just round up the tips that I have once again for this, and obviously the fact that you should really be using DDP eval can be handy. You can run it anywhere from an external USB hard drive, for example, or anything else. Have a look, and you can see, look, potentially this is how much you can save. Use data deduplication; it's great. And in terms of performance and all of that, I remember attending a tech day. It's a great event to actually attend. I will be sharing those in the resources list as well. And one of the things that was mentioned by the evangelist is it gives a performance hit of about 2%, which is something that really is affordable, as when you're saving so much space. The last bit that I want to talk about is storage pools. Now I don't have any demo or anything to do with storage pools, but storage pools and storage space is a fantastic feature in Windows Server 2012. I'd highly recommend you have a look. There's so many different configuration settings that you can set up, which will allow you to make the most of your storage. In terms of storage, Windows Server 2012 has some fantastic features that you can leverage, and I'd highly recommend that you investigate those. And we will now move on to the next section, which is Hyper-V. Welcome to the Hyper-V section. Now there's a lot of things we can potentially talk about in Hyper-V, but I'm just going to keep it short and sweet, and I'm just going to talk about a few features. We'll talk about obviously using the new VHDX format. It's brilliant because it will allow for very high scalability. You can have machines up to 64 terabytes in size, so massive sort of scalability options that you have as well. So there are a few tips and tricks that I want to talk about. For example, enabling the SRIOV feature, which allows you to get direct access to your network card, and taking away the layer of the virtual layer of the Hyper-V. And I'll just talk about how you need to create it first, otherwise you're not able to use it. So quick tips on that, and using minimum and startup memory settings. And there are a few other things which I won't demo, but there's certain things that you can really use, especially with SMB3. Hyper-V just is able to take performance, scalability just to the next level completely because of SMB3, and it's something that you should leverage as well. There are some other advanced features like VM monitoring, guest clustering as well, which you can use for high availability of your virtual machines. And there's some really nice features like live migration and storage migration, and one that's not mentioned here as well, Hyper-V Replica. There's so many features that you have in Hyper-V Replica, and my tips really are start using them. Just make use of them. They're fantastic, and they're free add-ons in essence. You can use them as it is. They're there with Hyper-V to be used, so just make use of them. Okay, time to show you some stuff. So let me just show you. So I've got Hyper-V in here, so just quick few tips and tricks in here. For example, here let's talk about SRIOV. So if I'm going to create a new virtual switch, now when I'm creating an external switch, I have the option of enabling SRIOV. Now notice, if I actually created this, and let that finish. If I created this without ticking that box, I hadn't ticked that box, what will happen is once I've created it, I don't get the option to tick it any longer, even if I later on look at that particular, and so I've got my new virtual switch, I cannot enable that. So the best option really is for me to, when I create a new switch, let's call that external for example, I would then need to enable that. So that's a tip that you need to do to make sure that you are able to use the SRIOV feature. Okay, and the next bit that I want to talk about is, so let's talk about adding a network card. So a quick tip on that. So when you're actually going to be adding a network adapter, when you add a particular hardware option in there, if you want to do a network boot, then you should really be using a legacy network adapter, as the others will not support a PXE boot. So that's another tip that you can use as well. We can have a quick look at some of the settings that you have for the virtual machines, and one of the other virtual machine settings that you could use is startup RAM. So for example, here I've set the startup RAM to be 1 gig. So when the machine starts up, it's going to be using 1 gig, because many times the operating system needs the most amount of RAM when starting up, and then once it's there, it can fall back to minimum amount of RAM. Obviously, if there are times when it needs more, you can go to maximum amount of RAM. You can also play around with the memory weight and so on. If you had so many different virtual machines, these settings can really help in terms of your performance, especially certain situations when you have to reboot a machine and so on and so forth. You might need to play around with these settings. So this is something that you can potentially look at. And the other bit that I want to show you is like the advanced features that you could potentially use as well. So if you've got a network adapter, there are some advanced features that you can use. For example, you can use things like port mirroring as well, and NIC teaming for if you wanted to just see what's going on in your network. Again, for VM management, you can use all these different features as well. And lastly, some of the other features that I want to talk about is live migration, storage migration. Again, these enhancements that weren't really possible in the previous versions of Hyper-V live migrations. You can do multiple simultaneous live migrations. The only limitation is your network, really. So there are these different settings that you could use as well. So there's loads of things that you can do in Hyper-V. Just get the Hyper-V Server 2012. Try things out. There's different development scenarios that you can use as well. So many different things. Just try it out. You will be amazed. And in terms of businesses, there's a lot of things you can leverage, a lot of cost savings as well, a lot of powerful features. And that's Hyper-V. So just finishing off again, I've included in the digital notebook, I've included a TechNet reference where you can look up different options in Hyper-V as well. And we will then move on to the final section then. Okay, welcome to the last section, which will talk about advanced features. Now, I'm not going to do any more demos in this, but simply just want to give you some tips on designing, for example, dynamic access control. Dynamic access control brings in a new layer of security, additional to your NTFS and your ADRMS security options that you have. What I would say that there is, just design your dynamic access control strategy on paper, try and understand how you can use it as well before you start, enabling any features as well. So there's a little bit more to it than, that meets the eye. So I would say, please just make sure, look into it a little bit more before you start implementing it as well. Features like IPAM as well are great. They'll save you loads of money, in terms of the IP address planning, troubleshooting, administration, everything. Just use it as well. They are leverage high availability solutions such as clustering, NLB. Clustering is now available in standard editions of Windows Server 2012 as well, so which is great. So you can, as a small business as well, you can leverage that as well. And again, with your standard requirements, you don't then necessarily have to, try and go for expensive solutions like Fiber Channel. Look at things like iSCSI solutions with iSCSI Target as well. So that's another thing that you'd want to try out as well. And implementing direct access has become easier. Well, it's become easier than it was previously, at least. So I would suggest, try out the test lab guides as well in a development lab to see how you can leverage this fantastic technology. So there's a lot more things in Windows Server 2012 that potentially are there for you to try out and experiment and use within your businesses and learn about. I would just advise you to just go ahead and continue with your learning journey. And now I'll move on to the last section really, which is just sharing with you all the resources that potentially you can use to take you further into your learning for Windows Server 2012. Okay, welcome to the summary and sort of the finish wind down of this video now. So we've covered a fair amount of stuff. In fact, this video ended up being a lot longer than I thought it would be, and there's still a lot of things that I haven't covered. But we sort of started off with an introduction where I covered everything that I was going to look at with you as well. We looked at getting started Windows Server 2012, including things like downloading the VHDs, doing a native VHD, a boot to VHD option, using differencing disks as well, and using other options like using Windows Azure, and using test lab guides to set up your lab as well. We looked at some of the way to get you around the GUI with certain shortcuts as well, and also using things like Server Manager as well. We looked in terms of server management, and we looked at different options that you have and all the sort of scalability that you're now getting with server management as well. We looked at Windows PowerShell, and we saw Windows PowerShell is really useful, really powerful as well. It's got so much more now as well, and with the Windows PowerShell ISE, there's so many more things as well. There's a lot of things like the Windows PowerShell Web Access, which I didn't talk about, but there's so many things in Windows PowerShell as well that you can potentially use as well. We looked at Hyper-V as well, looking at some of the features you could use as well, like SRIOV as well, live migrations, storage migrations, different settings for network cards as well, settings like port mirroring, and so on. We then moved on to look at advanced features and talked about how you can leverage features such as IPAM and dynamic access control, and just do things like clustering as well, network load balancing, and all these features like direct access as well, which can really help you in terms of your businesses as well, and just to try them out as well. And lastly, we're just looking at, in terms of the summary and resources, one of the things that I'll look at very quickly is certification. And what I've done, again, I picked up this nice little infographic from TechNet, again, which has statistics on why get certified in Windows Server 2012, and you're talking about how many jobs would be required, comparing 2009 to 2013, and the jumps up throughout the years as well, talking about cloud optimized data center as well. And what this infographic talks you through is the different options, different paths that you can go down as well, including the MCSA in Server 2012, and then moving on to the MCSE. The MCSA 2012 certification obviously gives you options to various other MCSEs as well, different tracks as well, and it tells you what are some of the options you can go for. You can do independent study. Microsoft Press are really brilliant in terms of your studying, so here's a big tip for you. Microsoft Press books are really good. In fact, now they also have Microsoft pre-press books where you can get the ebooks even before they actually published as well, and I'll give you some links to these resources as well. You can obviously do classroom training as well, so you can have Microsoft partners as well, learning partners who offer classroom training, and that's something that you can look at as well. Or you can look at online training as well. Microsoft Virtual Academy is another fantastic training utilities training place where you can go and find so many different videos on things on like System Center, Windows Server 2012, and so on. So there's different things that you have the option, and obviously all leading to a certification. And currently you've got second shot vouchers as well. So you've got a promotion on the second shot where if you do fail the first one, you can get the second shot absolutely free as well. And this just talks you through the different exams. Again, this is something that you can look at depending on what areas you want to look at. And finally, what I want to do is I want to sort of wrap up by looking a listing of the resources that you could use as well. Now there's the earlyexperts.net. Now there's a gentleman called Keith, and what he's done is he's set up these fantastic hands-on labs that you can use, with the evaluation VHDs for Server 2012 or in Azure, and you can actually go on and learn through the objectives hands-on for the 7410, 7411, and 412 exams to be able to pass your exams as well. And they have a LinkedIn group as well which you can use. It's brilliant. There are some video trainings, for example, specific for the 417 exam. You've got the Jumpstart. You've also got a Jumpstart just on Windows Server 2012, which was released several months back as well. For your learning, if you don't necessarily have all the lab equipment, then you can use TechNet Virtual Labs, a brilliant tool as well. Microsoft Virtual Academy. It's fantastic. There's so many different bits and pieces of information that you can get in there. Very handy for your certification, for your learning, and it's freely available. It's great. It's fantastic as well. Obviously, if you wanted to actually go ahead and train with someone, with a partner as well, then you can actually learn through a Microsoft partner as well. Many partners like Pearson and Practice, for example, are offering hands-on labs and first look clinics for Windows Server 2012, which are free, and you can attend a day of training with that. So that's something you can look up. The other options that you can go for as well, which are free, which are offered by Microsoft, are tech days as well. I've attended a few of these, the Windows 8 ones, Windows Server 2012. You've got Simon May and Andrew Fryer from Microsoft, and they host some brilliant tech days where you get to see the product hands-on and get to have a go as well, which are really great. UK TechNet. This is one of the reasons I actually created this video as well. Is you've got the UK TechNet blog where they publish some great content, but they also have competitions as well, where you can win some fantastic stuff. I've already previously won some really nice goodies from them as well. There are other things like books. So you've got the Introducing Windows Server 2012 free ebook as well. This was released a while back. It was released for the beta version, and then they released it for the RTM version as well. A brilliant tool, brilliant learning tool. It's got some really nice content that you can look at. Microsoft Pressbooks, as I mentioned, if you don't mind reading ebooks as well, you can actually then get you can also get 50% discount if you're an MCP, so that's something you can look into as well. Microsoft Press have a Twitter account, so I'll just quickly show this to you as well. On the Microsoft Press, if you follow them on Twitter, you can actually then be able to see they offer 50% discounts, or they'll have daily deals as well. So they'll have different daily deals. For example, here they have a daily deal as well for Microsoft Visual Basic as well, which is saving 50%. So if you follow them, you'll be able to get nice deals as well from them. So that's another nice handy resource that you can use as well. Now there is also another book which has been released, Windows 8 for IT Pros. Now this is also another great book that you can use to get to know Windows 8 as well. If you are looking to get some exams done as well, Prometric have a special going on as well, where you can pay for one exam which includes several other exams. You can look at the specific URL, so you can actually then find out what would be I guess it'll be a cheapest way for you to be able to get certified. And don't forget, the second shot is also included with that, so that's great. And lastly, I want to sort of finish off with an event that's happening. It's again by the Microsoft Virtual Academy as well, and what they're offering is sort of an hour and a half, answer all your questions, advanced questions about Windows Server 2012 and Windows 8 as well, and that's something that you can sign up for. It is going to be during work hours, so it's anything, I think it's between 4:30 and 6 o'clock GMT time as well if you're in the United Kingdom, or early morning if you're in the US as well. So you've got a great amount of resources that you can use, and lots more. If you just Bing it, you'll be able to find a lot of resources Windows Server 2012, but these are quite comprehensive. They're there to get you started. And that's it from my side. The last bit that I'll talk about is obviously access to this notebook. This is the URL that you need to access this notebook, which will have all the links that I've used, all the content that I have as well. And what I will do is when I post this on YouTube as well, I'll have that on just a comment section where I give the description of the video, and this can be there for you to use. So I hope this has been useful for you as well, and I wish you all the best, and thank you very much.